He was on my tomato bed, knees sinking into the raised soil, ripping out my vines with his bare hands. I dropped my phone and ran out in socks, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. He looked up, smiled like he'd won, and said, "About time you learned to mind your yard." Pause. By name, he was Mark Reynolds. House number 23, Maple Avenue. I was Jane Ellis, 25, Maple Avenue, 2 houses down. The garden I'd built was my whole free time: 2 cedar raised beds, 8 tomato plants, 12 pepper plants, a row of basil, and 3 blueberry bushes. I kept receipts. The beds were $420, soil and compost $150, plants and seeds $260. I told people it was a $830 therapy project. Mark called it filthy weeds. This didn't start as a war. At first it was snide comments over the fence. "You put the sunblock on those tomatoes," he'd say when I watered. He was 56, retired from a small landscaping firm, with a loud laugh in a yard that looked like a thrift store exploded. He had a habit of coming outside at odd hours. I noticed 2 patterns: he liked to come by after 11 p.m., and he always brought a small pocket knife. The first real incident was April 3, 11:12 p.m. I was inside reading when I heard a sound like someone cutting rope. I looked out to see 3 tomato vines neatly snipped and thrown into the grass. I was furious. The second incident was April 18, 2:03 a.m., my basil patch trampled. The third was May 2, 1:47 a.m., my blueberry bushes half stripped of leaves. I tried to handle it calm and adult. I confronted Mark on May 8 at 6:30 p.m. He shrugged and said, "Maybe the deer?" He lied so casually I could feel my face burn. He told me to stop fussing. One of his exact lines was, "You could just plant something that fits the neighborhood." I told him he had no right to touch my property. He laughed and walked back to his truck. I went to the HOA. Their secretary, Karen, lived 2 doors over. She knew Mark socially. She wrote, "We prefer neighbors to resolve disputes." I filed a police report on May 9 at 9:05 a.m. The officer said, "Civil matter unless it's serious." That felt like a shrug in uniform. The turning point came after the 5th time. I was exhausted. I couldn't sleep. My hands shook every time I watered. I knew I needed proof. So on May 15 at 10 p.m., I bought a motion sensor camera online for $79.99, model Nightwatch Pro. I taped it to the fence slat at 9:40 p.m. and plugged it into a small battery pack. I set it to record motion and email me every clip. The first week of footage was nothing. The second week I started getting files. May 22, 2:17 a.m., 42 seconds. I watched with my hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. The frame was grainy. A shadow moved from the side gate. The figure wore a baseball cap. He crouched, reached into my bed, and I could see, terrible and precise, the knife flash. He said, "Clear as day, told you I was done being polite." Pause. May 29, 1:12 a.m., 1 minute 16 seconds. The camera got closer. The figure hummed as he worked, and I could make out his gait. He turned his head right toward the fence and muttered, like taking candy. The voice was Mark's. I had proof. I had dates, timestamps, and his voice. I felt a weird wet hot in my throat. I wasn't just angry. I was deliberate now. I saved every clip. I burned 2 copies to a flash drive. I printed my receipts for the cedar beds and plant invoices. I sat down and made a list, like a lawyer: dates, damages, estimates. Total damages so far, $540 in plant losses, plus estimated labor and replacement $250. I wrote an exact demand, $790, paid within 14 days, or I'd file in small claims and post the evidence publicly. But I wasn't going to stop at a demand letter. I thought about what made Mark proud: his landscaping clients. He ran a tiny side business called Mark's Yard Care, business card, faded green, phone number 555-0142. He couldn't stand being publicly humiliated. Reputation was everything. Here's how I did it, step by methodical step. 1. I posted one clip to the neighborhood Facebook group, Maple Avenue Watch, at 9:02 a.m. on June 3 with the caption, "Caught on camera, frozen timestamps. This is my property, 25 Maple Avenue." I left the audio intact. Within an hour there were 28 comments. People were angry. Someone wrote, "That's Mark, he's done this before." 2. At 11:15 a.m., I sent the full video and a PDF of receipts to Mark's business email from my home address. Subject line, "You owe $790, evidence attached." I also sent the clips to the HOA and to Karen. She replied at 11:58 a.m., "This is serious. We'll schedule a meeting." Her tone changed. 3. I called 3 of his clients. I found them from a flyer he'd left at mailboxes. I said, "Hi, this is Jane at 25 Maple. I have footage of Mark tampering with my property. Are you comfortable?" 2 said they'd stop his service immediately. 1 asked to see the clip. Within 24 hours he lost 2 weekly clients, $60 per yard, $120 a week, $480 a month. For a small business that mattered. 4. I filed a small claims suit on June 6 at 9 a.m. for $1,200, covering damages, replacement, and humiliation costs. I called it emotional distress on the form because I had sleepless nights and medical bills for stress-related migraines totaling $120. Court date, July 12, 10:30 a.m. 5. The instant karma moment was unscripted. On June 7 at 7:03 p.m., Mark came back into my garden. He thought the Facebook post had died down. He walked through my front gate, shoulder hunched, looking for loose ends. I watched from my kitchen window, my hands clenched on the sash. I called 911 and said, calmly, "My neighbor is on my property destroying my plants. I have video proof. He's here right now." I pressed the call record button on my phone. Pause. Mark bent over my lavender and started snipping. He didn't notice I'd propped my phone on the porch with the loudspeaker on. He started muttering, "I'll teach her." A van pulled up, Mrs. Patel from 27, who was out for her evening walk. She saw him, yanked out her phone, and asked, "Mark? What are you doing?" His face turned red. He stumbled back. At 7:08 p.m., when he realized he couldn't walk away without a witness, he sprinted. He slipped on the gravel by his own driveway, split his knee, and fell forward into his truck bed. He sat there dazed, clutching his knee. He looked like a man who'd been caught by the one thing he underestimated most, community attention. By 7:13 p.m., Officer Hayes was at the scene. He had the footage I'd already emailed to the precinct. Mark tried to say it was just a prank or her basil is overgrown. The officer asked him, "Why the knife?" Mark mumbled something and finally blurted, "She brags too much." It was petty. It was small. But the officer wrote it down. Mark got a trespass citation on the spot and a written notice to stop any contact with me. The officer looked at me and said, "We can make it a criminal mischief case if we have repeated violations." The next morning, by 8 a.m., the Maple Avenue Watch post had 412 reactions and 98 shares. A neighbor uploaded the video to a local community page and wrote, "This is who Mark is." Mark's phone lit up with angry customers. By noon he had 2 clients say they wouldn't hire him again. By 3 p.m., the landscaping company that occasionally subcontracted to him called and asked for his license number and insurance. He didn't have either. They dropped him. At the small claims hearing on July 12, I presented the receipts, the printed clips, playable on my laptop, the police report timestamped June 7 at 7:13 p.m., and the list of lost clients. Judge Morales watched the videos twice. Mark tried to deny everything. He stammered about neighborhood maintenance. He had no receipts to counter mine. The judgment was $1,150 plus court fees. He had to pay $300 restitution that week and the rest in installments. The real cost to Mark was reputational. Within 2 weeks, his side business evaporated. Flyers in mailboxes that once said "Mark's Yard Care Affordable" were replaced by typed notes, "We do not recommend Mark Reynolds." He sold his old ride-on mower on July 27 for $180. By August he listed his house as for rent. He moved out in September. For me, the revenge didn't feel like victory at first. I'd spent weeks angry, had sleepless nights, and used up vacation days to attend the court date. I lost $120 in migraine treatments and about $50 in coffee from late-night edits of footage. But I got paid $1,150 by judgment, which replaced the beds and plants and then some. I bought new soil, new cedar planks, and 2 bluebird houses. I still watered twice a day. I still looked over my shoulder at night. Mark apologized once, on paper, 2 months later. The letter said, "I'm sorry for the trouble I caused. I'll keep my distance." He never offered to pay beyond what the court ordered. He never came to the new garden. Sometimes I see him drive past on Maple Avenue, his jaw tight when he looks at my yard. My hands still tremble when I tell the story. But when the first tomatoes ripened in August, I cried. I watered the plants with hands that once shook and now felt steadier. A few neighbors asked why I didn't just forgive and forget. Because forgiveness without accountability would have been silence. Because if nobody spoke up, he'd do it again. Because some people only understand when their reputation is on the line. I won't pretend it was clean. It cost time and stress. But watching him trip over his own arrogance, to the sound of neighbors calling him out and the police writing a citation, that moment felt instant. Karma had a price tag and a jury. What would you have done in my place? Pause.